Hello, and welcome back to the Advocate's Justice. Now, in the last one, I kind of rambled on and on about the particular topic. Well, hopefully there won't be as much rambling, but anyway, last time I mentioned it's still Magic the Gathering, but last time I made some remarks about the storylines that they use. I made some allusions to some other aspects, like within the world of the game, the lore and stuff, but I also made some allusions to gameplay mechanics. I'll talk more about the gameplay mechanics later, but let's get to one of the things I mentioned. It goes hand in hand with the story. It is the settings, the worlds. Now, like with the storylines, there's a good bit of variety. There's still things they want to do, things they haven't explored yet, but settings, not just the world itself, but the characters and places within each location. Yeah, I gotta say, they got some pretty cool ideas, some that you wouldn't really think of. Like, just some examples. Ravnica, a big city divided into parts. 10 more or less equal parts. Each guild occupies a different part of the city. You've got the sewers. You've got the slums, like the government district, that's the Azorius. The academic sector, that was the Izzet Guild. The sewers and the slum areas. The Demir, they lived in the back alleys. They kept to themselves. You didn't know they were there until it was too late. That kind of thing. And then you have Mirrodin, world made entirely out of metal. Its inhabitants, pre-Phyrexia, they were, even the human folk, they had bits of metal as part of their bodies. Like they had limbs made of metal, or they had that weird metal helmet thing. Like some of the Leonin, the cat folk, they had that. And after the corruption of Mirrodin, the Phyrexians were there, and the five Praetors, they had, each one had its own look, and then anyone who had been corrupted by Phyrexia, the Phyrexian oil, they are missing body parts. Some of their limbs, like an arm or something, had been amputated and replaced with a metal spike or a claw or something like that. Yeah, pretty freaky. And then, of course, we've got the more recent ones. I already mentioned Ravnica and Mirrodin. Actually, those could be considered recent because, yeah, Ravnica, that was 2012 to 2013. Mirrodin was a little before that. Now, yeah, I mentioned those two. Theros, Greek mythology-based setting. The world of the gods, Kamigawa, another mythology-inspired setting. They got what they were going for in terms of the world. They had a story. The idea of multiple deities within a world, that's kind of a staple of fiction, like the fantasy fiction, where there's especially if it's Asia or like ancient Greece or Rome or any of that mythology, there's always going to be the concept of multiple deities. They never really, in Magic, there's never really mention of a single deity. Like Kamigawa and Theros, they both have their own worship system. In Ravnica, you've got the Azorius. They're kind of a false religion. Innistrad had something like that, but then Avacyn woke up and shook everything up. I'm not too familiar on how the religious system shifted beyond the fact that Avacyn is the one that they worship. She's not a deity, but she might as well be. And Innistrad, when it started out, it was a world inspired by gothic horror. Like, you had the werewolves, you had the vampires, you had the zombies, and you had the humans who were just trying to survive. And then throughout the set, by the end of the story, the werewolves had changed to just be sentient, like wolf-like beings, and the zombies were gone. The vampires were kind of there, but not. Basically, the humans had won, the angels were back, everybody was safe. And I could go on for a while about all of the different aspects of that, but yeah, more storyline content. But yeah, that's just my little thought about the worlds themselves. I like what they do with a lot of that stuff, and then of course the real cool ones are like Alara, where it's a world like Alara or Zendikar, a world made of mana. Like the internal parts of the world, there's just so much mana compacted. In Alara, that's what caused the 5 shards to reconverge. In Zendikar, that's what was holding the Eldrazi prisoner. And when the Eldrazi were freed, the world was flooded with mana, and it was changed into something that no one really saw coming. But can't really say there's too much I don't like about that aspect. Not too bad. Overall, it's a positive for me. They've done some pretty cool stuff. Now, moving on with the setting, there's more than the where, there's a who. Now, the different parts of each location, you've got your different sectors, you've got your different neighborhoods. In most cases, you've got like, okay, here's a city, here's a forest, here's the docks. Like, it's especially apparent in a place like Innistrad or Ravnica. Like in Ravnica, you have different parts of the city, and then you have the outskirts of the city. In Innistrad, you had the different cities. Like you had Thraben, you had all the other ones. In Lorwyn, you had the parts for the locations for each tribe. There was Ren's Run, there was Auntie's Hovel. Ren's Run, that's where the elves lived. The Auntie's Hovel, that's where the goblins were. There was the different fairy places. There was the places where the giants lived. There was the different places where the Kithkin lived. Of course, in Ravnica, I mentioned the Ancient 10 guilds. You know, that's another thing beyond the different parts of the city. Theros, again, different cities, different provinces. Kamigawa was more each tribe or what have you. But speaking off of from a character perspective now, they've had some memorable characters and some not so memorable characters. It's nice to have a balance of both, because you give other characters a chance to shine, but sometimes they fall flat. Like the Planeswalkers are cool, and it's especially cool when they give them backstories, the web comics for each Planeswalker, because you get to see how they became a Planeswalker, and some of them, it's nice because some of them it's nice to have that because they've just alluded to their backstory. Like with Elspeth, they said she had fled a plane that had been devastated by something. but they didn't really say too much of what it was. But then you get the Scars of Mirrodin, and they say the Phyrexians were the ones that had raided her home, and she fled from them. So when they come up on Mirrodin, of course she's going to want to try and stop them. But it was between, before she had made it to Mirrodin, of course, she met with Venser and Koth, and prior to that, Ajani. Ajani kind of talked to her, and then they parted ways again, and then she got suckered into going along with Koth and Venser. So yeah, the Planeswalkers, they're pretty much the key characters of the game, but sometimes they get stale, hence why they have to kill them off or phase them out for a while. I mean, Nicol Bolas, he's been a character in the game for basically since the early days of Magic. His debut was the Legends expansion back in 1994, somewhere, early in the game. He was part of a cycle of, he was a setup, one of 5 legendary dragons. He was the one they brought back in Time Spiral in that story. He was there because he was one of the Planeswalkers that had been more or less drafted to deal with the time rifts that were affecting Dominaria and all the other planes, the multiverse as they call it. But he was weakened after that conflict, so he went to find a new source of mana to restore his power. That's when he made his way to Alara. He found Alara, and he was the one that caused the conflux. He was the one that caused the shards to come back together. They revealed that he was the one who assassinated Ajani's brother, which of course that gave Ajani the spark that he needed to planeswalk for the first time. And of course, Sarkhan was introduced in a similar manner, like around that. Basically, the way I remember it is, Ajani found his brother, his pride turned on him, he fled Naya, ended up on Jund, met Sarkhan, and his spark ignited fully. And since then he's been after Nicol Bolas to get that vengeance, and he dealt with that. Nicol Bolas, after what happened on Alara, the 5 worlds were won again. Nicol Bolas heard about the Eldrazi, and after what happened with Sarkhan, Sarkhan was sent to Zendikar, and then that happened. Zendikar being the home of the Eldrazi, the prison. So Nicol Bolas was behind the Eldrazi coming back, and then the battle between Jace and Tezzeret happens, and Tezzeret is nearly destroyed by Jace. Nicol Bolas saves him, revives him, or whatever he has to do to him, sends him to Mirrodin, and he's only there as a spy. Nicol Bolas doesn't actually do anything on Mirrodin. He's just kind of, Phyrexians, what are they up to? Then he just kind of goes away, but then they decide to make Magic 2013 based around Nicol Bolas. Like, he doesn't really do anything within the story. There's no real story. It's just Magic the Gathering, the Nicol Bolas edition. It was random, but interesting. It was kind of cool. Like, they reprinted his Planeswalker version, but aside from that, he didn't really need to come back for that. But core set, okay, we'll let you have that one. And now we just had an M15, and they decided to, like, Magic 2014. It's the Chandra edition, new version of Chandra, and now Magic 2015. Garruk was in the spotlight, new version of Garruk. Pretty snazzy, pretty spiffy version of him, actually. The that Liliana placed on him has fully taken over. So they did work a sensible story into that. That, I will say, nice job. You actually did something good, something that worked. You didn't just bring back a character because you felt like it. Now, some of the other characters, Planeswalkers, they're in a league of their own, but now you get to some of the characters on each individual plane. Hey, on Ravnica, you've got each of the guild leaders. On Innistrad, you had the mayor of each town. You had Avacyn. You had some other characters here and there, like Olivia Voldaren, leader of the vampires. And on Lorwyn, there was each tribe leader. And of course, Shadowmoor. The tribe leaders were there, but they were twisted. On Mirrodin, you had the different leaders, like you had all the Mirren aligned leaders, and then you had the Phyrexian aligned leaders, you had the Praetors, all these different leaders, and then you had the ones, they were important, but they were not actually a leader of anything. You had, like, there was the Brothers of War storyline forever ago. You had Urza and Mishra, a pair of powerful artificers, or whatever they're called. However you say it, they specialize in artifact magic. And you had a guy named Ith. He was a very powerful magician. You had, of course, most recently with the Theros block, you had all the gods, and they pulled that, with Kamigawa, you had all the gods, and then you had all the spirits and all the leaders and all the samurai. Now, Khans of Tarkir, you've got the 5 Khans, and then you got the Spirit Dragon Ugin. We know very little about him, aside from, now we have a tidbit that Fate Reforged, it was a war between Nicobolus and Ugin. Ugin lost. Nicobolus. Haven't we had enough of him? Really? I mean, if you can make it work, okay, but haven't we seen him enough? Yeah, there's some memorable characters, like the Gods of Theros. They were pretty memorable. Avacyn, back in that storyline, she was memorable. The Eldrazi, they were memorable only from a gameplay perspective. They had some really crazy mechanics in the game. So, really, that's where they're real well known from. The werewolves in the first part of the Innistrad story. Innistrad Dark Ascension, card game more than anything. Kamigawa had its own set of cards that, so overall memorable characters, some honorable mentions obviously, and some what were they thinking kind of deal. All in all, they haven't been doing too bad a job with that. There's some that they should just, because Nicobolus was last seen, as I mentioned, Magic 2013. That was a core set from 2 years ago, actually. It was right before Return to Ravnica. I guess their argument is, hey, he's been gone for 2 years, that should be plenty. Point is, he's kind of, I mean, still trying to figure out why Soren's on there are on Tarkir. I mean, he's just visiting. That's all. That's what it seems like. Oh, Soren's like, oh hi guys. Meanwhile, Sarkin is like, this is my home. I am a dragon. That was cool. What they did with the new version of him in the card set, that was cool. He becomes a dragon. That is Sarkin, and it is the latest in a wave of planeswalkers that can turn into creatures. But it does it in a way that hadn't been done before. I mean, within the mechanics, Gideon Jura, both his original printing, or his original version, card version, and then the Gatecrash card version of him, he has an ability that he can become a creature for a turn, so he can fight for you. That, so far, he's the only one that they've done that with, but now, of course, now, the Dragon Speaker version of Sarkin, his plus ability makes him a creature. For Gideon, in both cases, it was a 0 loyalty. It was a free ability to use. That has its positives and its negatives. Like, Gideon, the Gatecrash Gideon, he got stronger and stronger because his plus ability, might as well say X plus 1 because of how it's worded. That's how I've always looked at that. That might as well have been worded as X plus 1. Still powerful effect, and it just scales his second, his 0 ability, making him a creature, makes him stronger, and hard to deal with under the right conditions. I won't go into too far into that because it's leaning into gameplay territory, but we're not too far off from getting to that, talking about gameplay aspects. So yeah, I've got considerably more to say about the gameplay mechanics, because when it comes to the game, the Magic game, not the lore of the game, but the game, I am actually more in tune with that. So obviously I've got plenty of thoughts about that, different mechanics and the kinds of cards that they've printed over time. Not just during the time I've been playing, but before I start playing. Like, I have cards from before my time, like a lot of the old school cards. Like, I didn't start playing until the original Ravnica, but I have things from Kamigawa, the original Mirrodin. I have things from pre-8th edition. Some of that's, of course, I have those old cards courtesy of Time Spirals, time-shifted cards, or core sets, like later core sets, or the dual decks, or the From the Vault stuff, or even the things like Arch Enemy or Plane Chase or Commander. I have I got the Kalia theme deck. I have all but a few of the From the Vault sets. I have all 3 premium deck series. I have all the dual decks. I got quite a bit of Khans of Tarkir, actually, and I've got a good bit of M15. Didn't get a lot of M14, but the reprint, I have a good bit of the reprints. I like reprints. That's something I'll touch on when I get to that. Yeah, miscellaneous. I've kind of given a few here and there. Nicobolus, please stop. We get it. He's been around for 10,000 years and probably longer. But seriously, can't you write a story without him? I mean, he's a cool character. Dragons are cool anyway, but he's stale by this point. I mean, if for someone who's just started, like someone who just started in M15 or someone who just started with cons, they've just started playing the game, they won't really know who he is. But for someone like me who's been playing a while, if someone who's been playing since the old days of the game, they'll know Nicobolus from his original card, his appearance in Time Spiral, and then his appearances after that. Yeah, people who've been playing for a while, they'll know who he is. I mean, if they've only been playing since like M13 or something, they won't know too much. Like, oh, okay, he's back. But someone like me who's been around for a while, be like, he's back again? I mean, bringing Soren, Soren is random. Sarkin, yes, justified. When they bring back characters, there's a limit to how many times you can get away with it. Elspeth, they made that work. Like Johnny, they made that work. Really, it ties into the story. Like, what are they going for and why? So really, I just gotta say, they need to kind of moderate how they bring characters back a little better. If they're able to work them into the story, okay, fine, but Nicobolus is just, he is the one that they brought back the most in the story. Now on the converse of that, there's some that they should just stop printing in card form. It doesn't matter how popular they are. I mean, look how many different versions of Jace there are. Seriously, we've got his original version, his worldwide version, the M12 version, the M14 version, the M15 version, his Return to Ravnica version. That's like at least 5 or 6. That's kind of crazy. We've had like 4 or 5 different versions of Garrett. We've had at least 4 versions of Chandra, 3 or 4 versions of Liliana. We're only on the 3rd Soren, 2 Gideons, 3 Elspeths. Then the one-shot, like Karn, he was a one-shot, Tamio, she was a one-shot, Kiora, Ashiok, Vraska, Xenagos. Yeah. Obviously the plane-specific characters, they're going to be one-shots unless they revisit a world and that character is somehow still there, but otherwise, you know, the Planeswalkers, they can go wherever they want, but they kind of shouldn't. Beyond that, you know, as far as the diversity of the different worlds and the characters and stuff, that's good. Keep that coming, but don't recycle characters so much. Keep them fresh. That's about all I can say on that. I mean, overall, like I was saying, I do like what they're doing. I do like the direction of the game, storyline, world-based. I'll touch more on the card game itself in a later video. So, yeah, that pretty much, I'm gonna say that's gonna wrap up my thoughts on that. So next time, I think I can get into the card mechanics. I can start talking about the cards. There are different aspects to the card game. I'm not going to be going into how to play it. There are plenty of other videos. I've considered doing my own, at least a deck tech on something, but no gameplay tips. I'll assume you know how to play the game and leave it at that. Give my thoughts as usual. Now, this weekend, I'm going to AwesomeCon in Indianapolis, barring anything unforeseen, so I will probably post a slideshow of pictures, I'll post some videos, I'll do my own little coverage. I'm excited because it's going to be the first convention the first, like, pop culture convention. I've been to religious conventions in the past. Yeah, back in high school, there was one year I got to go to Ascension Convention. or no, one year I went to Acquire the Fire, just a two-day thing. The year I went, they had it at Ball State University. It was a Friday evening and all of a Saturday, to a lot of music and stuff. They had it in Worthen Arena here in Muncie, Indiana, and then both that year and the next year, I went to one called Ascension Convention. It was an Easter convention held in Chicago, Illinois. In 2009, there were two that I went to at Ball State freshman year. One was Fall Retreat. They had that at Lake James, and it was just it was for fall break. It was for like a few days. We were up there, praise and worship, music, all kinds of cool stuff, hanging out with people that we knew. It was really just it was just us Ball State people. And then they had one at the end of the year, Indy CC. It was a week in Indianapolis, held it. For us, it was the middle of Christmas break. It was fun, actually. There was some music. They had a special appearance by Starfield, a contemporary worship band from Canada. I was excited because I'd actually heard about them from a friend of mine, and I bought one of their CDs while I was there. And the only other time I'd ever had to see one of the more well-known bands live was at Acquire the Fire. They had Pillar make an appearance. They had Red make an appearance. I think there were some others. At Indie CC, they had, of course, Starfield do a guest performance. They always have their own group, or at least they have a local group come in. Usually it's just the college's worship bands. Like, yeah. But as many times I've wanted to go to one of these, like Gen Con or San Diego Comic Con or any of them, just never been able to, between money and transportation. Well, there's also the aspect of having the free time. Well, couldn't go to Gen Con because I didn't have the time, more than anything. But this, I've got a free weekend, and I just found out about it last week by a TV commercial. I was like, wait, that's coming up. Oh, I might actually be able to go to it. And I went on the website, and yeah, it's the October 3rd to 5th in Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm not sure who all to expect. I know at least one of my friends is going to be there. Maybe I'll bump into her. Maybe not. But I'm super excited. If you're going, sorry, I bumped the camera there. If you're going, look for this hat. I'll be wearing this hat, and one of the days I'll be wearing a Roni shirt that I have, Rainbow Dash and Daring Do shirt. I'll be wearing that, and if I can find it, I got a super black shirt with the Super Mario Brothers characters on that. Yep. And of course, you know, my face. I'm easy to find. I'm not really that hard to spot, really, but definitely look for this. And I'll be wearing a backpack, red backpack with black and gray on it. Bit tattered. It's really just one of the straps is falling apart. I did have duct tape, but that came off. So yeah, Awesome Con Indianapolis, October 3rd through 5th. I don't think you can pre-register. Obviously not at this point, but you can pay at the door. I'm not sure how much it's going to be until I actually get there, but in the meantime, muffins. This is Advocate of Pants signing off until next time. It'll either be an update video from AwesomeCon, or it'll just be my next Advocate Discusses. Next time will be about the card game of Magic the Gathering. Well, until then.